Welcome to this edition of the MDM podcast. I'm Tom Gale. Fastenal has built one of the strongest sustained value creation stories for investors over the past 10 years as a high-performance distributor. In our program today, we're going to explore the strategies and evolution of their value proposition over that time to build what many market analysts describe as a machine. I had the opportunity to discuss Fastenal's success formula in December with Holden Lewis, Fastenal's CFO, and we'll share some of his comments in our discussion today. And I'm delighted to introduce my guest today, John Gunderson, who wrote a three-part series for MDM with a deep dive into how they differentiated and positioned themselves over the past 10 years. John's a former member of our MDM team and today a channel strategy and profitability consultant with the Dorn Group. John, welcome.
Thanks, Tom. Thanks for having me.
John, your analysis examined how Fastenal's differentiated and positioned themselves with a look at the value creation levers that they've used to build their competitive advantage over the years. And I'm really excited to get into our conversation. But before we do, I'd like to briefly set the stage. We've looked a lot at Fastenal, and it really got a little bit deeper at our 2023 Shift Conference. In the keynote in September, the distribution practice leaders at McKinsey & Company presented research on how high-performance distributors have grown their valuation over the past 10 years. Out of 52 North American distribution companies, McKinsey identified the top 12 North American distributors by their enterprise multiple, also known as the EV to EBITDA ratio, or multiple, from 2013 to 2023. It's a key indicator of performance. Fastenal's 2023 EV to EBITDA multiple was 18.2x. Their 2013 multiple was at 14.1x, which was at the top of the list as well in that year. And for reference, the EV to EBITDA ratio for S&P 500 companies historically ranges from about 11 to 14x, and many privately held businesses have a multiple in the mid-single digits. Among the 12 firms that rose to the top for this metric were Fastenal, Grainger, Ferguson, Global Industrial, and many others that we cover at MDM. Three themes emerged from McKinsey that separated these high performers from the rest of the pack, and that in turn drive these multiple valuations. The three themes are growth, margins, and capital efficiency. So with that, John, I'd like to get into our conversation because I know you looked across all these three dynamics and dove into some other aspects of that. So where do you want to begin?
Well, Tom, I just think it's a fascinating story, and not to alliterate on Fastenal, but I view them more from a kind of a distributor lens, right? Their financial performance is exemplary. And there's a lot of great partners and leaders in the field. But I think the way Fastenal's done it is really kind of revolutionary in a lot of ways. They've doubled their sales in almost 10 years, or close to double their sales in the last 10 years. Their gross margins have gone down, okay, over those 10 years, their gross margin percentage. But yet they've been able to grow their total EBITDA and net profit significantly. So, you view those things and you're like, okay, well, they must have done a lot of acquisitions. No, they did it organically. And when you dive into it, they moved from a branch-based distributor to what I call a customer-focused distributor over the last 10 years. I mean, Tom, when we were setting up for this, I was thinking, if you were to tell a distribution vet like you and I 10 years ago that you'd be doing a podcast on a distributor who closed 1,000 branches in the last 10 years, that they have actually been able to double their sales while doing that, it's almost unthinkable.
Well, I was just going to say, and at the levels of profitability that they've been able to generate through that.
It's just fantastic. So it's a fantastic story. So really in our series, we took a deep dive into what they did and how they did it. And, I put it in two buckets. They understood how to use automation, and they understood the changing end customer. So Almost every move they made had some sort of automation component to it. And by that, I mean finding a way to reposition your human assets, your people, your facilities, finding a way to automate that. So they got big into vending, right? You put a machine on the floor of a manufacturer, that's automating a process that used to be a human process. There's a lot of what a functionality and time in there and savings. They also automated their tech stack in their digital programs and how they process orders. They must have done incredible work on their AP and their AR and how to take cost out. They almost automated every part of their operation from top to bottom. And they continue that automation today. And then the second big thing they did was self-service. They understood that customers are moving from a full service model to a self-service model. So, not to get to what I would call high level on it or too low level, they understood the fact that customers wanted to do more self-service things, check stock, orders, having the material in their location instead of at the Fastenal down the street. They put a lot into self-service, giving the self-service functions to their customers versus full service. Now, customers still value full service. It's a big part of our industry, right, Tom? But they're willing to pay less for it. And there's more and more things that they want to do self-service today. So almost everything they did is in those two buckets, automation and serving the self-serve end customer. What's your thoughts on that?
Well, what's interesting, John, is and triggers for me is that particularly over these last 4 years, through the transition that every distribution company has been going through post-pandemic, or since the beginning of the pandemic, I should say, it's really been about this business model transformation. And the things that you outlined in the series and what we're talking about today, Fastenal really began that 10 years ago in many ways. I mean, there were a lot of people doing digital transformation, standing up e-commerce. I would say that many people were focused more on putting up the web stores and providing those types of shopping capabilities, where clearly Fastenal was more focused on giving their existing customers those tools to check stock, inventory, availability, all of those things that more defined quality of customer service on a day-to-day basis in their historic relationships. Would you agree with that?
No, I would agree. And just to add on to your comment about adding more value in the historic relationships, they made an effort to put people, their people on site, right? I'm going to have Joe working at the craft plant as a Fastenal employee, helping them manage their inventory. That's a key step. So that fits right into what you were talking about. So for like every branch that they closed, they put people in the physical locations of major customers. And today, what's interesting is they report their locations in both a physical branch, that's a traditional distributor, but also their on-site locations that are inside. They've got their employees coming through the security gate of their, General Mills or wherever they're placed. And I think that was a very key strategic move that they made. Now, there are also other distributors doing that. I just think Fastenal kind of doubled down on that. And that's part of why they have such great performance.
And in my conversation with Holden Lewis, his comments were around, because I think I referenced the series and how you talked about the pivots that they've made, and I talked about the transformation. And he said, we don't really view it that way as a pivot. We view it more that we really became more customer centric. And then everything we started to create in our strategies and how we wanted to move forward was really built from the customer out to us. And that's where they, as you just outlined, where the branches were closing, but they were actually putting their people closer to the customer, not taking them out. And a lot of distributors might have been closing branches, but they were probably more times than not probably reducing some of the outside sales force and moving more to inside sales to support the digital strategy as well.
Yeah, and Tom, I think that was just a smart strategic move. And then on the automation front, so once they put the human assets at the physical location, they also backed it up with an incredible tech stack. So now today, they some of their forward-looking statements, they expect to get 66% of their total volume through what they would call an e-commerce type transaction or a digital transaction. So that's somebody taking something from a vending machine that's a Fastenal vending machine. That's an EDI order coming in direct. That is a online point, click, put in the basket and ship order. If you think about having 2/3 of your orders coming in that way, think about what that does for your business as a distributor. I think a lot of people just think about, oh, it takes a lot of cost out. It also creates an exemplary customer experience. And I'll give you an example. When a customer is doing an electronic transaction from their ordering system to yours, you eliminate a possibility for an error. If they call your branch, if they come in and you have somebody mistype the order, you may ship them the wrong product. When they're shipping, when they're saying, I want this item at this level, this SKU with that level of specificity, and I want 3 of them, you're going to ship them 3. So you don't have credits and rebills. You have what I would call a very seamless transaction. So the more of that they're doing that you don't have to touch, the higher your fill rates are, the better the customer service you have, the less dependent that you are on your employees to make and eliminate errors. It's like a flywheel, right? The more automated you get, the more accurate you get, the better customer service you have. And to actually have someone saying that they're going to have 66% of their transactions done digitally, that's got to be an industry leading stat that everybody needs to try and reach.
And then there was two elements of that Holden addressed in our conversation. He talked about resource redeployment into the customer-facing solutions, and what that looked like in terms of their technology deployment, and freeing up their associates to focus on those higher value and value added services that really create that deeper quality of customer service and experience. And that also was very much tied in with what he talked about around a high touch value proposition for what was really their guiding principles, and how they were executing on their strategies.
Yeah, Tom, I would just say if you think about all the resources you're freeing up from the basic order process, you can then devote those resources to high value parts of the business where you really need a human being. That's where you can have a highly engineered solution can't really be digitized in many cases. You've got to have a very highly skilled human being helping the end customer with that, doing drawings. There's lots of back and forth. That's not going to be automated anytime soon. But if you can free that highly skilled person up from putting in orders to doing that type of work, then you also grow your services business, your value added service. And I think that's been a big part of what they're doing. They talk a lot about how they're redeploying their sales force into specialists who are highly specialized to help customers. And that is not self-service today. That's full service, and it's going to remain full service.
So as you got into this, John, and kept digging, and you've been in distribution and several types of sectors and types of distribution companies. What what really rose to the top for you in terms of kind of an aha for you in terms of all the pieces that they're doing?
Tom, What really rose as an aha is obviously they're 75 or close to 75% of their business, they say, is manufacturing or light manufacturing. So they're very industrial based. I think I was looking at the final reports, about 9% of their business is non residential construction. The rest is end users, resellers, wholesalers. So if you think about where their business is, they're very focused on the industrial. So what really struck me was how they were able to automate and get closer to the customer. And it feels like they followed the customer. As the customer changed, they changed with them. And I think a lot of distributors struggle with that. Now, a lot of what they do would not necessarily apply to a construction based distributor because the channels are different. And I'm sure we'll have another podcast on that. But for what they did for industrial, for their main segment, that manufacturing, they really followed the customer. What I think they were really good at was gaining shelf space. I think in one of the articles, I talk about how many millions of square feet their vending machines occupy. I actually took the time to figure out the size of their machines times the number of machines. I took a wild guess. It's probably pretty close. They have machines on the floor bolted in concrete. So, Tom, how bad do you got to screw up for them to unbolt your machine and throw you out and replace you? Once you're there, you're very, very, very hard to move out. They just have a great understanding how it gets so embedded with the customer. You really got to screw up to get fired, and you're going to get every chance to fix the problem.
Embedded into a workflow. There's no better way to create a deep engagement going forward. For me, it's really going to be interesting to see over these next few years how that evolves when you think about AI and where that's going to go, and the support for this type of I think distributor value proposition as far as really elevating, I think, the opportunities for distributors to just get that much closer and serve customers much better.
Yeah. Tom, I just think this is a good case. There's a lot of great distributors doing this, and not just Fastenal, but regionals and locals and many others in the public space. But I think what they're doing and what many of those others are doing is really following the customer and adjusting to it. And they're investing in a lot of technological solutions that are leading edge, that I just think they're worth following. If you're in the channel, you got to read as much about what they're doing to understand that is coming through the whole channel over time. I think it's just a fun series to write. I'm sure we're going to talk about it a lot more.
My thought when you mentioned that, in terms of there are so many distributors now that are using vending as a very important component of their value-added services, but by far, Fastenal was out there in the market first and ahead of the competitors, and there absolutely was catch-up on that. But I also think it's a lesson around, even though competitors do catch up, I still think they, based on what they continue to do and kind of their ongoing learning and the way that they've continued to develop that, it's not like they've really lost a lot of that competitive advantage. It's been such an important part of how I think customers view them, and when they're evaluated, that first mover, that makes a difference, I think.
I do too, Dom. The last thing I'd say to close is one thing is very apparent from it's just my opinion. Fastenal knows how to use data, and we're both very involved in data and have worked together on that a lot over the years. Fastenal knows how to use data, and they have one thing I look for in every release that really jumps out to me, and it's this release. I think in the fourth quarter, they said they are within 30 miles or 30 minutes of 95.3% of the manufacturing base they serve. So that tells me they know who their customers are, they know where they're located, and they're using data like no other. Because I can't say as I've seen that in any other report. So if you know you can cover almost the entire country for your manufacturing base, which is 75% of your business, that tells me you're a data-driven distributor.
So, John, we're going to pull together your series and create a special report. We're waiting for some final numbers from 2023 to kind of complete that out. You want to just talk a little bit about what you see adding to what you've already done, just as far as what that final report's going to look like?
Yeah, they release a lot of stuff once a year that we're going to do some more dive in, and there's 3 or 4 things we didn't cover in our series. No, I think it's going to be the most comprehensive report. When Tom releases it, I would encourage you to read it and view it in your, if you're in the channel, view it for how it applies to what you do. There's got to be parts of what they're doing that you should consider as a leader. There's probably parts of what they're doing that you're already potentially doing. But it's always, it's always good to see what someone else is doing. And I think in 8 or 9 areas, they're pretty far ahead of the average distributor. And from a manufacturer perspective, Tom, in the special report, we got a lot more about private label and their inventory strategy. We didn't cover that on any of the podcasts today. They provide so much information, we could probably have 5 podcasts on them and 4 special reports, right?
Absolutely. No question. John, thanks so much for your time today. Always great to have a conversation, and looking forward to that final report. We'll certainly make that available on all of our MDM channels. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom.